Alright, getting into chapter 2.7, we have 3 more sections before our last test of the quarter, and I think it's a very important moment for some of you. Many of you are trying to find a way to increase your classroom grade without doing any extra work. I say that because I've only had about 4 out of 75 students come in and try to actually raise past quiz scores. I also say that because remember that your test next week is part of the 50% portion of your grade, and I don't think you understand really that doing well on this can solidify your grade or raise your grade, but doing poorly on it can destroy you. Some of you have, let's say you might have a C or a D, and you might have done extremely well on the last test. Well, if you do the opposite this time, it's going to pull you down about 1 or 2 quiz or grade points. So again, make sure you're beginning to focus more on understanding the material than you are on getting 100% on homework. I notice again that people are getting 100% on the homework. They're turning their math Excels, they're breezing right through it like everything is easy because they think it is, and then the quiz comes up like it did last week and you get smashed. So again, look at the game. The test is worth 50%, homework is worth 10%. Those of you who are trying to overtake the system and get done with your homework quickly and getting 100% on that, it only helps you with 10%. But then when you screw up on your quiz and test, that is really where it hurts. So again, keep in mind, you need to make sure you're doing it right. Not just getting it done, but doing it right. You have until October 13th to get all that stuff done. So I don't know what changes you might need to make, but just make sure you make those changes. Moving on though, today's material is about solving proportions. The key idea behind solving proportions is learning the rule and organizing yourself. For those of you who rush through the question and attempts to finish first or save space on your paper, which as you know is eventually thrown away anyway, that typically causes your errors. So looking at some vocabulary words, a ratio is a rate or comparison of two things. We saw ratios last section when we learned that 1 foot is equal to 12 inches, and we either wrote 1 foot over 12 inches or 12 inches over 1 foot. These are both ratios. Ratio is just a fancy word for fraction. We use these ratios in units to eliminate and convert. The same thing holds for other comparative situations. So again, the ratio just relates two numbers. 1 foot equals 12 inches, 12 inches equals 1 foot. You can apply this to real life situations. If Joe runs 2 miles in 11.8 minutes, one ratio that connects these two numbers is 2 over 11.8 or 11.8 over 2. If you can drive 345 miles on 23 gallons of gas, the ratio comparing or relating these numbers is 345 over 23, or, as you see, 23 over 345. So whenever you equate two ratios, that means put an equal sign in between them, you create a proportion. The general format of a proportion follows here. So again, this is not what you're going to see, but that's just a general mathematical representation of a proportion, which is something over something else equals something over something else. The rule is simple. We simply set the cross multiples equal to each other and solve. So what I do is I draw a line from here. I say that A multiplies by D, and it will equal B multiplied by C. As I stated earlier, the only reason you're going to miss this question, aside from being weak in solving, which I hope you're not at this point because we're almost done with the chapter, and that is by trying to skip steps or move too fast. I am going to always, and as always, show you the best way to get 100% of these problems correct. Whether you choose to stick to my format or create your own method is up to you. Either way, as I said, this quarter is wrapping up. The test is coming up next week, and it's the last test of the quarter. And like I said, I hope that you make it through all this stuff. And again, this section is only 1 day long and is definitely within your reach. So we're just going to look at some examples and move on from there. You're going to see problems like this. P over 4 equals P plus 3 over 6. And again, the rule is easy. P meets 6. That equals 4 meeting P plus 3. The main reason why people are going to miss this is because of the parentheses. But again, make sure you take your time, because the parentheses tell me I need to distribute, getting 4P plus 12. From there I solve. I'm going to move my 4P over by subtracting it. Getting 2P equals 12. Dividing both sides by 2, I find out that P is equal to 6. And again, the math itself is not hard. The problem is some of you are going to see this and go 6P equals 4P plus 3, because you naturally multiply this, but you forget that that gets multiplied also, and you're going to put a 3 instead of a 12. So if you are doing your own method, Just make sure you're doing your own method the right way. But again, the safest way to do it is to write the parts in parentheses and then do the math and go from there. Not try to save time, not try to save space, but just to do it right. Here in this one, 15 and 2 will meet. Set them equal to x plus 9 meeting 5. This side over here equates to 30. And again, that 5 needs to meet both of them, so you end up with 5x plus 45, which again, once I get here, the math is easy. The x is on this side, so I'm going to move my 45 over here. Getting negative 15 equals 5x. Dividing by 5 on both sides, I get negative 3 equals x. And that is all. And again, I think we learned that the other time, that x is actually equal to negative 3, but it doesn't matter with the equal sign, because remember, the equal sign doesn't switch like the other ones. Third example, which would probably be the toughest one you'll see, but like I said, none of these are really tough as long as you take your time, is where 6 meets b minus 4. Set that equal to 6b plus 4 meeting 2. Distributing that, you get 6b minus 24 equals 12b plus 8. And again, once you have that part, everything else takes care of itself. I always tend to move the smaller of the two. So I'm going to move 6b, getting negative 24 equals 6b plus 8. I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. That makes negative 32 equals 6b, and then I'm going to divide both of these sides by 6. I don't think 6 goes evenly into 32, so I'm going to reduce that fraction using my calculator to get 16 over 3. So negative 16 over 3 is equal to b. And that is my stopping point. Keep in mind that on Math Excel, you need to make sure you are reading that parentheses part, because you don't know if it wants a decimal or a fraction. But for the most part, most proportions want fractions, so you want to convert those things back. But again, I don't think you've seen anything really different outside of the first step, which is just to set it up and go from there. Everything else has been something you've been working on for the last 3 weeks or so. So again, I hope that you take it seriously, especially the way that quiz beat up most of you. I hope that you make the change necessary to do it, to get it right. Application problem real fast might say Hank's pickup truck can travel 85 miles on 5 gallons of gas. How many gallons will the truck need to travel 34 miles? This is where your ratios come in. The first sentence says it can travel 85 miles on 5 gallons, so I'm going to put as a ratio 85 over 5. You can put the miles, you can put the gallons, but again, as long as you understand what is what, you will be fine. But we are going to create a proportion to do it. It says how many gallons will the truck need to go 34 miles, and your only job in this problem is to put 34 in the same location as the other miles problem. Well, we went 85 miles, so 34 should be up by the 85, and we don't know how many gallons, so we'll just put an X there. Again, 85 is miles, 34 is miles, so we put those on the same location. For example, if I would have put this, then 34 would have went on the bottom, because these are both miles, and the miles need to go by each other and the gallons need to go by each other. Other than that, working this out really, again, is not that bad. 85 meets X and 5 meets 34, which gives me 85X equals, that's 2170, I think. Let's make sure. Yep, I still got it. And then you divide both sides by 85, and I think it comes out to be 2. You do. And X equals 2, so it would take 2 gallons to go 34 miles. So again, that pretty much is your general idea what's going on there. Alright. So move on to Math Excel, begin working on today's assignment. Again, be sure you are looking online, SPS 186 for your classroom breakdowns. I'm going to talk about this really quickly because some of you don't understand how to use strategy to correct your situation. I have 2 students here, random student parts that I pulled out of my book, of students who both have about anywhere between a 55 and a 65%, and I want you to understand why they have the 55 to 65%, because these numbers here. So again, in your SPS 186, when you check your grades for my class, it has everything broken down here. You've got your unit assessment, which is your test that represents 50%. You've got your Math Excel and everything, which is your 10%, your weekly assessment, which is your 40%. Notice this student is probably doing badly, not so much because of tests and assessments or tests and quizzes, but notice that their homework grade is extremely low. And again, this student I believe has 56% or something like that. Actually, I think this student has a 61. But anyway, I know that I think they're right around 60% range. But again, the reason is not because they really are passing tests and quizzes, but they're doing terribly on the homework, which is why they're about to fail if they don't make some changes. But again, looking at your numbers, identify your weakness. This just happens to be their weakness, which means that if they do this by the 13th, remember it's due next Friday, that's actually where your deadline is. But if they get this grade up and they continue to perform on these two, then this student should be okay. Here's another thing you need to think about. Their unit assessment, which is your number, says 60%. Remember, you've only taken one test. So this student obviously got a 60 on their first test. Here's the problem. If they have a 60% and they got a 60 on the first test and they don't score at least a 60 on the second test, this average, because remember, average means take two things and add them up. Let's say they get a 50. That is going to drop 5%, which is not good. So again, you need to make sure that if you look at this number, that is your goal target number to keep your grade where it is. Again, some of you have a 60 or 70, and right now you're doing 20% work. That's not going to help you when that test pops up, so you might want to make sure you fix that. We have a quiz coming up, but quizzes don't change so much because we've got a bunch of those in there. But other than that, looking at the second student who also has about a 60%, somewhere around there, you notice that they didn't do well on their test. They're doing decently on their quizzes, but this student is at least turning in all their Math Excel. But again, this is what's hurting them. And if you look at it, you would think, well, that person got a 60, that person got a 35. Why is this person passing? Well, because that's the 50% portion. This person's doing perfectly on homework, decent on quizzes, but the 50% portion of the grade, they're being terrible, which is why they're hurt. Now, here's the thing. If this person scores anything above a 35, then this grade is going to stay in the passing and everything is going to do like it needs to. So again, you have to learn how to play this game, and the way you determine the grade whenever you look at it is by taking this number times that plus this number times that plus this number times that. I'm going to show you. So here we would do 35 times 50% is a decimal is 0.5 plus 100 times 0.1, which is your 10%, plus 61.5 times 0.4, and you notice that this person has a 52% F. But here's the beauty of it. If they get a 70, that brings us up to a 52%, which now if I type in 52.5 times 0.5 plus 100 times 0.1 plus 61.5 times 0.4, notice what their grade does. Because that one test, again, that's why I was talking about, if you're in this situation where you have a high test score for the first chapter, if you drop, it can drop you that much. This person's grade increased by 8% because they did better on the test. Your grade can drop 8% or more if you do terribly on this test. So again, please be careful. Don't mess yourselves up, and make sure you start making the proper decisions. If you have quizzes to make up, please make them up, because I really don't want to have to give a bunch of F's just because you allowed yourself to get caught off guard, even though I've been warning you, I believe, since August to not get caught off guard. So again, we have 3 more weeks. Make the right decision. Time is going to fly. Make sure you're doing the right thing. Good luck.